5, 4, 3, 2.
Hello and welcome back to Tennis Unfiltered with me, James Gray of iNews.co.uk and the iNewspaper. It's been a few days since you've heard from us, and I apologise for that. It's mostly my fault, but that is what happens, unfortunately, when you get into your 30s and all of your friends start getting married at the same time. In better news, I have been able to track down Calvin Betton, still out in New York, who's been enjoying the sights and sounds of New York City on a humid September day. Calvin, as you just said to me, what a week. Maybe the best place to start is with the most recent occurrence. It's kind of a low note, I suppose. A heartbreaking third-round defeat in the US Open. I mean, proud to be there, but I mean, you must feel a bit like you got pretty close.
Yeah, it was rough yesterday. It was a great atmosphere. It's a great experience. I mean, by the end, I don't know if any of our listeners watched it, but there were probably about 1,000 people around the court by the end of the match, I think. There were people watching, sort of standing on walls to try and get a watch. And it was a great atmosphere. It was a great experience for the lads. And it was just tight. We were never actually that close to winning it, which I think would have made it even worse. We weren't ever in touching distance. So strange as it seemed, because it was 7-6 in the third, we, Henry and Jules, they served second in the set. So they were always catching up. And then in the tie, the actual closest that they came to winning the match was 8-5 down in the tiebreak. So they were 5 points away from winning the match. So, yeah, it was, but prior to that, 2 matches were great. It's just a great tournament. I think it's a fantastic tournament, and to be winning matches there is just a real career highlight for me and for the lads. I think. And what stands out to me as well is, again, say what you will about America and how they hold their tournaments. The people love tennis. They really do. They'll watch anything.
Tell me a bit about. I mean, you obviously came through. What was it? The French in the second round, Ali and Barrère and Blumberg and Johnson. You won really comfortably. I mean, we sometimes get so carried away with the success that Henry and Jules have had over the past 12 months or 18 months, I suppose, that we don't sometimes talk about the actual tennis they play. I mean, what was it that got them so far? What have they done so well in New York this week?
I mean, they just serve great. They both serve great, and they're both great servers partners. So they're just difficult to break. They didn't lose serve at all in their first 2 matches. I think they probably had 2 break points against them, maybe in 2 matches. Yesterday we lost serve twice, but against good returners. And yeah, they're just very, very difficult to break. And then they can sneak a break, or they're good in tie breaks. That's basically what happened against the 2 French lads. That in the first set, the 2 French lads were probably the better team, but it got to a tie break, and the dynamics change in a tie break. You don't have to win 4 points to break; you have to win 1 point to get a mini break, and that's where things change. So yeah, the French match, the match against the French lads was tough. They're obviously both very, very talented tennis players, Quentin Halys and Gregory Barrère. And the French always know how to play a bit of doubles anyway, even if they don't play much on tour, because they play so many league matches and that kind of thing. And like I say, Henry and Jules didn't play great in that match, but they won the points that mattered. I said to them before they went on that they can either win it by playing excellent tennis and playing good tennis, or they can take it to the trenches, and that's what they ended up having to do. First round was good. They played well in the first set, although I'm not sure Steve Johnson had real desire to be out there in the second set, which was good for a wild card, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, George and I have already been talking about wildcards this week. Lots of people were interested and got involved and got in touch when we were talking about Venus Williams getting her wildcard, and quite how useful that was for anyone.
I mean, it's been a lot of conjecture, especially on the doubles side as well, because an American pair, Reece Stalder and Evan King, who've done very well recently, they made the last 16 at Wimbledon, were told that they wouldn't need a wild card because if they signed, then they'd have enough, and if not, then they'd get one. And they didn't give them one, and they were basically only about 5 or 6 places out, I think, of getting in. And they gave wild cards to a load of basically lower ranked singles players, and some college players and some juniors, which was pretty rough going for Reece Stelder and Evan King, because they've put the work in, and they've put a shift in to get where they are, and they're talented players.
Actually, just before we talk a bit more about New York, Calvin, I've had a question that's been sitting on my mind for a while from a listener, and I think you'd have some interesting thoughts on it. So it's kind of regarding the protected ranking, actually. So it comes from Harry, who's a new correspondent, as far as I can tell. Thanks for your question, Harry. He says, really enjoying the podcast. I couldn't help but notice when scrolling through the US Open draw to see the name Attila Balázs against Daniil Medvedev in round 1. This guy currently has no ranking and has not won a tour-level match since 2020. He appears to be turning up he appears to be using the protected ranking system to get a nice paycheck before he retires. It seems rather unfair on players that are playing regularly and close to a main draw spot to just miss out to Balázs. What are your views on this? He provides some good context that Balázs has won just 4 tour-level matches in 2020. He only played 2 in 2021 and lost both of them. He's played a total of 7 games last season one total of 7 games last season from 2 slam matches using protected ranking, and he's won 8 games this season from 3 matches. That does seem pretty ridiculous, and probably you would hope the tours would look at that and go, that we need to fix something here. Incidentally, he won 2 games against Daniil Medvedev and then takes home a check for $70,000 for doing so.
I don't actually know Attila Balázs at all. He's skipped my eyesight for the last, barely played tennis for the last 5 years by the sounds of it. The protected ranking thing it's a difficult one. There's no real obvious answer, to be honest. It's there for a reason, and it certainly helps a lot of players. And it's complicated how it works. I kind of keep getting it explained to me, but I don't really get it. It's your average of your ranking. It's an average of your ranking
of the 3 months before you get injured.
Yeah.
And then, I think that's right. And then
it depends how long you're out for as to how many you get, but there's no time limit on how long it takes you to use them. But what's particularly strange about it, and I know this through Colin Beach, Kyle Edmonds' coach, told me, that you're limited to actually what you can play, because he was getting hammered kind of for using his protected ranking for main tour events. But if you're inside a certain ranking, and I don't know what it is, you can't enter challenger events in singles. So if your protected ranking is there, whereas Kyle wanted to actually play challengers, and he would have used his protected ranking to get in challengers, but he couldn't do that, and he could get into the 15s and 25Ks.
Yeah.
So there was no real, there's no real logic in that at all. I think that kind of needs sorting. But at the same time, Beach was telling me that he's basically got 1 protected ranking left,
right?
And he's not going to he's going to use it for one of the slams, which you would, because it's being out injured, you're not getting paid. Tennis players are self-employed.
Yeah,
and the slams are, I think for singles players, about $55,000 for first round. So you can't blame anybody for doing that. So I don't really, it's one of those. I think tennis has probably got bigger issues to get its mind around the protected ranking, which in most cases actually work, I think.
Yeah. Although you have to say, in this case, Attila Balázs quite clearly just on like a retirement streak.
Yeah, and there was some talk actually that Steve Johnson has actually retired now, who the boys played first round.
Yeah.
But he wants to play in. He wants to officially retire in Indian Wells next year, because I think he's from California.
Right. Okay.
He wants to officially, but then apparently he's not going to play between now and then and use some sort of protected ranking to enter that, which again seems a bit. What the suggestion there was that he's not going to play between. His ranking is whatever it is now. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But he's going to use his He's not going to play, and you don't have to prove that you're injured. You just have to not play.
Yeah.
And then he's not going to play and then use a protected ranking to get into that.
Weird. Yeah, I can't really think. I haven't got. I mean, Harry, I appreciate we haven't given you a full answer on your question, but if you've got an idea of how to fix it, or if anyone does, drop us an email like Harry did, tennisunfiltered@gmail.com. Lots of you have recently, lots of you telling us about the UK TV coverage. Kind of what I'm going to do is, I think we'll talk a bit more about the UK TV coverage once the tournament's over, because there's always going to be teething problems with these things, and there have been some. And I want to kind of give Sky the chance to redeem themselves in the last week when everything gets a bit more serious. But thank you, and keep your feedback coming. It's really interesting. Calvin, I don't know if you're aware.
What's been the problem? Because obviously I've not seen anything on Sky. So what's been the general gist?
I mean, the general gist is that they're running main event almost like a sort of Soccer Saturday style thing, where if there's good tennis going on somewhere, they'll throw to there, which has its pros and cons. I mean, it means you don't miss it, but the multi-court coverage and court select is not that easy to access. For example, if you're watching Sky on laptop or desktop or anything like that, you can't get onto the multi-court coverage. I have Virgin Media at home. I can't get onto multi-court coverage on my TV, so I can only do it on my phone, which is the only thing I have the app on. So there's some frustrations with that. And also, like, whenever you're running a main channel and you're choosing matches, people are, especially in the first week, people are always going to be like, why are you showing this? Why are you not showing this? Which, so that I heard the tennis podcast talking about how there was a big stink in America because one of the cable providers and ESPN had a fallout, and ESPN got pulled from one of the cable providers.
I wondered what happened there, actually, because when I went to put it on, when I got back to my hotel room the day before, I was watching it one day and I put the same channel on, and there was some sort of strange statement on the channel that they wouldn't be showing anything by this provider. So there was just nothing on in its place, just a statement on the screen.
Yeah,
I meant to actually go down and ask what was going on at the hotel. Thought it was the hotel that had a problem with it, but right.
No, there was a major dispute between Disney, who are the parent company of ESPN, and one of the cable firms of the US who supply over the rates basically they're charging. And so 15 million people or 15 million homes lost ESPN during one of their quite big properties.
Wow.
So it's also like the football season's about to start. The baseball season's just getting to quite like a pinch point because obviously the playoffs are not far away. So it's quite. I mean, clearly that's not coincidence. Like, you want to do this kind of thing when it's most serious. But yeah, quite funny, really. Just to come back to New York as a whole, Calvin. I mean, it's obviously your first time coaching in the US Open and experiencing Flushing Meadows. How have you found it? Like, what's been better? What's been worse than other Grand Slams? I'm intrigued to know your comparisons.
I mean, I'd love it. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but I absolutely love it. I had the time of my life here this week, and you just really get a feel. I mean, the official hotel that I'm in at the minute that we've been in all week, it's bang in the centre of Manhattan. You come out of there, it's a 10-minute walk to Times Square and 10-minute walk to Empire State Building and 20 minutes to Central Park, and you just really get a feel of the city. You're in. I mean, New York's one of those cities that you know you're in it anyway because it's just built that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas for Paris and Wimbledon, I don't. You could be anywhere unless you choose a hotel that's next to the Eiffel Tower, I guess.
Yeah.
Then you could actually be anywhere, or bang in the centre of London. Whereas this feels like the tournament just feels like New York, and then you've got to. When you drive there from the drive from the hotel to the tennis centre, sort of you go over the bridge over the what river is it? Is it the Hudson River? Or,
yeah, it's the Hudson, I think.
Yeah, into Queens, and you see all that. And then on the way back, you see all the skyscrapers and the high rises and what have you. It's just a great tournament, and then I like the grounds as well. To be fair, it's well set out. It's a good size. Every court seems to have some kind of seating on it, which you can't say for Wimbledon. But also, seating, Wimbledon and the French don't seem to have got it right. They either have seating. Wimbledon has, some of the courts have standing but no seating, whereas the French only has seating and you can't watch anything from standing. Whereas the US Open everywhere has, you can wander across and have a look in on a court. Or if you want to watch it for longer, you can go and sit down on it and that kind of thing. And the main thing, what has struck me is that, and again, I think this is something that Wimbledon, all of the tennis tournaments really have to get a grip of, is that they do let people wander in and out. They'll try and stop you walking in during a point, like during a point, they'll put your hand up and then some people ignore it. But between points, you want to go and get on your seat, crack on. And it's just, there's no reason why you can't do that. And I said to the lads, did it bother you? And they were like, for the first 5 minutes, it was a bit strange. There's a lot of coming and going, but then you just stop noticing it. It's just like any other tournament. Yeah. And it just, that's one of the things where tennis is just completely in the dark ages. Like Wimbledon holding people in a queue. Wimbledon and the French Open, and most of the tournaments holding people in a queue for 15 minutes sometimes while matches are getting played. It's just ridiculous.
Especially with tennis getting longer and slower and games getting longer. I mean, at least this year at Wimbledon, and I think at the French as well, they started letting people in at one love, because I mean, I remember timing it. Like, there genuinely is 90 seconds between like the first and second game of a set in singles these days, because the players stop at the chair, they have a drink of water, they rearrange all the clothing. So at least I've done that. But
there's no reason why you can't do it, because it does not bother the players at all. If you have it, and we've said this before, what bothers the players if there's nothing happening, then suddenly something happens.
Yeah.
And the same with sound. Whereas if there's constantly people moving, no problem.
Yeah. I also saw, Calvin, from your Instagram that you went and had a hit on Arthur Ashe early one morning in the rain. I mean, because I've only been to New York once last year for the Open, and I found Arthur Ashe the most remarkable sporting stadium I might ever have been in. I mean, what's it like to stand in the middle of it and actually try and practice?
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. It was quite strange, actually, because it's not rained. I think it only rained since I've been. It only rained for that about half an hour, or maybe about an hour. At that time, and basically what happened, it was the day that we played our first match, and we had our warm up on the match court. Myself and Barry, Julian's coach, had got there early, and we'd said to the lads, "We'll meet you at the court," because they were finishing their sort of physical warm up in the gym. And as me and Baz got there, it's sort of a couple of drops, and then it suddenly just started tipping it down in no time. And the players' gym is in the Arthur Ashe building.
Yeah.
So we texted the lads, going, "It's raining. We're coming back." And then as we came back, I said to Baz, let's have a look, see if the court's free. And this was because it was early morning, because we were on first that day. So I think the match started at 11, so our match warm-up was 9:30.
Right.
So I said, let's just go and see if Arthur Ashe is free. And there was no one on it. So we just said, right, tell the lads tell the lads to come here, and we'll play until we get kicked off. And we got our full match warm up in it.
I love that idea of it's the classic thing you say on like a park court, isn't it? So you get on, we booked it from 2, but we'll just play until we get kicked off. And there you are on the biggest tennis stadium in the world.
Yeah. We had a typical image, really lowered the tone of it. One of the greatest stadiums. The roof was up, and then one of the lads, we had a bet if anybody could hit the roof with the ball. And Barry claimed that he could, and fell about 40 metres short of it, I think, in the end. I mean, it's a huge stadium, and it's a great view. I went on the first day that I got there. I just went because I wanted to go and sit on the furthest seat away from the court. And I guess it would be the furthest seat away from a tennis court anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
Yeah. Unless you're in Miami, where they have that stadium in a stadium. If you went and sat at the other end of the football field.
Yeah. But... so then I went and sat up there. But then if you look over, you turn round, you see the whole of the New York skyline. Yeah. In it, and it's just some people say it's too big. I actually because when I went and did that, Sabalenka was practicing. So there's no one really on there, but you can see what's going on. I thought that people had told me, you can't even see anything. You can see, you lose a bit of, if you're watching from the side, you lose a bit of depth perception in that you don't really get an idea of the spin. But other than that, you can absolutely see what's happening in the match. That's not a problem. But it's a phenomenal arena, phenomenal stadium. And I went and watched a couple of matches there. We went and watched, because it's obviously right next door to the New York Mets Stadium.
Yeah.
So we went to watch a little bit of baseball one of the nights, and that finished really early. We got there in the 5th innings, and it was over half an hour later.
Oh, geez. How weird.
Yeah, well, it was apparently both teams were playing their starting pitchers. So,
so they just rattled through.
And to be honest, it's all we wanted as well. Me and a couple of the lads said, we'd like to experience it and do that, but then we didn't want to stay and watch a whole match. But then when we came back, we got a car back to the hotel from the tennis. We said, how about, let's go and see if we can get on Ashe and watch a bit of, I think Alcaraz was playing. And we saw 1 point, and then Dominic Koepfer pulled out.
That's brutal.
And then I went and watched just randomly. I went and sat on and watched a bit of Tommy Paul against Davidovich Fokina the other day. So yeah,
Well, it sounds like you've had
the strange thing about it is that it's never full, and it's never remotely full.
Yeah,
and I'll say it's never full. It will be full for the finals and that kind of thing. But every other time that I went on, and I went on maybe 7 or 8 times just to have a look, I would say it was never more than 60% full.
I would say, and yeah, I sort of noticed the same thing. Other than I was there for the Serena, the thing, so that it was pretty full that night. But I think there's also and we have a lot of American listeners who may disagree here, and I'd love to hear from you. But it feels to me a bit more like American sporting culture there. Like if you go to Test cricket, for example, quite often that will look 70-odd% full, maybe slightly more. But it's because people are off, they're getting beers, they're going and getting food, and the one of the great things about having an Ashe ticket is you can go to other courts, you can have a wander around, you can go and get cocktails or whatever it is. So there's an element of that as well. But yeah, I mean, presumably it sells out most days and people are just off on. I mean, certainly that's the excuse the organisers always give is you can go and do other things.
Yeah, I think I don't know what somebody told me that they only sell enough tickets for Ashe in the whole grounds, but that can't be right. There's more people than that in there because there's ground passes. You can buy ground passes.
Yeah.
So they were saying that if everyone in the grounds went to Ashe, it would be full, but that can't be right. There's definitely more than that people in the grounds.
I can't think what the exact numbers are, but that doesn't make sense to me at all.
I mean, it's when one of the days we came back from practice, and it was when the night session was coming in, but there were still matches going on from the day session, and it was absolutely heaving that day, and around about that time. There's a lot of people in there.
It's a site that doesn't have many walkways, and so that bit between Ashe and Louis Armstrong just gets absolutely rammed.
Yeah, it's like a big square, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
But a few things that I didn't quite get. Like again, I don't know why. I guess it's maybe always happened that you get people they'll go and where the players come in and out of the changing rooms, which are again in Arthur Ashe. There are like adults who will stand there, sometimes with their kids and sometimes on their own, just waiting for the players to come in and out. Like you've paid 180 quid to just go and stand there with one of those giant tennis balls for hours on end.
Yeah, go watch some tennis, jeez. But that's the thing I do often say to people. I think because you get a bit immune to it because we're both the same. Like I remember when my mate had his parents at Wimbledon. And as media, you can take them up to the media bar, which looks over court 14 or whatever it is. And I said to my mate, I said, "Oh, look, there's Tim on his way past. We see Tim Henman all the time. We don't say hello to the rest of it." And his parents, "Oh my God, there's Tim Henman!" And they got such a kick out of him just walking past. And it just kind of makes you remember that these people are, and our listeners will be the same. These people are heroes, and you just get a bit immune to it. And for some people, just a glimpse like that is such a big deal. And that's a great thing about tennis tournaments, especially the first week, is players still have to get to the court. And there's no secret tunnel to court 3 or whatever it is. They just have to get there. So I suppose it's kind of fun in that way. But any significant? I mean, Calvin, this has been overwhelmingly positive from you, which I think most listeners will be a little bit unfamiliar with. Any big Flushing Meadows gripes?
No, don't think so.
It's incredible. The food?
Yeah.
The food any good?
Food, very good. Very well priced as well. Very reasonably priced. I mean, as always, if I'm going to be... This is not really against Flushing Meadows. The standard of chocolate in America is absolute crap.
Oh, it's
because of the
awful.
It's the weird milk rules they have, isn't it?
Is that what it is?
Do you know about that? Yeah, they can't sell chocolate with... I don't know whether it's pasteurized or unpasteurized milk.
And that's the good shit, is it?
Well, it's apparently the milk that they use for all chocolate in America is like the long life milk. They don't use and that's why it tastes different. That's why even Cadbury's and everything tastes different in America.
Yeah, it tastes awful. I mean, really, really bad.
Yeah, it's entirely to do with them. It's illegal to, but it's strange because when you buy a pint of milk, that's normal milk.
Yeah,
You can't put it in chocolate.
Although I have to say, as someone who drinks like coffee with skimmed milk in it, I found it pretty hard to track down skimmed milk in New York. And the first time I ordered a coffee, I forgot, because sometimes I just say a latte, and I forgot to mention that I didn't want it with butter in it, and because the full fat milk, the Americans have, was just horrific. And literally, I set it down for about a minute. I went and got something, came back, and there was a skin formed on the top of my coffee. I drank it, and it was stuck on my moustache, and it was the most disgusting thing that has ever happened to me. I was nearly vomited into the cup.
But yeah, no, I can't think of anything really negative to say about it. It was
excellent.
Just excellent tournament. Maybe if we'd have lost first round, I'd have been here moaning about everything. But,
it's been bloody hot.
Traffic's obviously been brutal.
Well, especially driving from Manhattan to Queens, literally any time of day is absolutely horrific. People who listened to the mini pods last year will know I was really enjoying the Long Island Railway, because I was staying by Penn Station, so I could just zip in and out of Mets Willett Point, which is ideal. Let's talk a little bit about tennis. I think we probably should. Seems rude not to. I've just watched Calvin. We are going to fill in the whole of the third and the fourth round in the next 20 minutes or so. So there will be some things we miss out on, but some we don't. And I'll draw on Calvin's expertise. Maybe the one we should talk about, Calvin, is Jack Draper's run to the fourth round, which just ended a couple of minutes ago in a 4-set defeat to Jack Draper.
Andrei Rublev.
Andrei Rublev, sorry. Yes, thank you. A bit of a funny one, really, because obviously great for Jack to get to a last 16, but sort of hasn't really beaten anyone apart from Hubert Hurkacz, who, by all accounts, was sick as a dog. I mean, important to get the points, given what he's been through this year, and he was defending quite a lot, but I'm sort of struggling to get too excited about this run, given he's not beaten anyone of note.
I mean, I think the thing what you would get excited about is that he's come through fit and, with his body in good shape.
Yeah.
And, that's a massive bonus for Jack, in the last year, isn't it? So
Yeah.
And, you've still got to beat Hubert Hurkacz.
Yeah.
It's one of those, I think with his ranking, like you say, his ranking's dropped down so much that you've got to say fair play to him. And he's beat them all pretty comfortably as well.
Yeah. And also, I suppose, Michael Moe, who is a really fun player to watch, but, he was a wild card. He's not inside the top 100, or at least he wasn't before the tournament. Playing with a home crowd. And, Jack is someone who's struggled with the pressure of tennis at times. Like, he's those cramps against Nadal in Australia, for example. We always talk about how players don't cramp in practice and that it is a psychological thing as well as a physical thing. Yeah. So I suppose to get up and be able to get up for those challenges. It was really interesting, actually, Calvin. I heard James Trotman, because they've started to really work out how to use the fact that coaches can coach all the time now. And they really had the mics turned up in the Rublev-Draper match. And Trots was saying he was 2 break points down, Draper. And James Trotman was saying, enjoy the challenge. Let's see if we can get through this. Enjoy the challenge. I thought that was a really interesting little insight into the kind of relationship. I mean, you obviously know Trots quite well. But he seems like a really kind of perceptive coach as well as maybe a technical one.
Yeah, he's very much that. Deep thinker.
Yeah.
Great lad. And excellent coach. And that doesn't surprise me, using messaging like that. I think is good stuff. And... that, like I say, that's the sort of thing that a good coach would be saying to him. It's interesting you say that they've turned the mics up. I saw a little bit off topic. I don't know whether you saw John Millman having a moan about coaching on court.
He is very active on Twitter these days, John Millman, isn't he?
Yeah, but he's kind of always... I actually don't know him that well, but the people I know him say he's a really good lad, John Millman. But I disagree with him on almost everything. Because he said something about it doesn't add anything to the...
Here. Yeah, he says, coaching from the sidelines adds 0 to the product. Even more distracting watching the coaching on TV. Players should always have been left to figure it out themselves once they entered the arena. Yeah, I go on, Calvin.
I can't disagree more, because it absolutely does add something to the product. You're there, James, telling me what Trot said. And so, people who are watching it would be saying, that the people are fascinated what managers say. I'd love to watch a football match if the coaches were mic'd up. Yeah. You see, in basketball, sometimes they allow the mics to go into the timeouts and that kind of thing. And it's fascinating when you can see that.
Yeah.
Consequently, tell you what no one cares about when they're watching. Ask 400 people why they like tennis, and find out how many people say, "Well, I just really like that they have to solve their own problems." No one's going to say that. I don't get why the exceptionalism of some tennis people when they go up, they bang on about this thing of like they have to solve their own problems.
Yeah,
like they still would. Like they still would. And also, what? I don't get why that makes tennis interesting.
Yeah,
like what I just don't like. And again, I said it before, like. You're telling me that boxers don't solve their own problems when they go and get in the ring? They do exactly what their trainers say, and that's what wins and loses them the matches. Like it's just a nonsense, and I don't get it. He also had a bit of a rant about Simona Halep as well, which again, this is one of those things that I don't like because I'm sure he's been on tour with her, and I'm certain I know that he's quite friendly with Simona Halep, and he was trying. I don't like it when that people try and sort of claim the innocence of somebody just on the basis that they know them. Yeah. He wasn't claiming the innocence, says she's been treated disgracefully and this kind of thing, which, if she's innocent, then she has, but, she might not be innocent.
There's not a huge amount, I know the Simona Halep case quite well and have spoken to a lot of people around it. There's not a huge amount I can say about it. What I can say is it's pretty bloody complicated. And the thing is, it's very easy for a player to say, "I'm innocent. Why haven't I been proven innocent yet?" And it's like it's very hard because it's an ongoing case. The ITAA, for example, can't stand up and say, "Well, here are all the reasons we think you're not innocent." It's like it's an ongoing investigation. Like we can't do that. So I appreciate it's frustrating that it's gone on a long time, and if it comes out at the end that she is found innocent, we should have a conversation, and maybe there really should be a conversation about how players who are suspended and then have their suspensions lifted compensated for that, because in theory they have lost the chance to earn there. Look, Simona Halep is now part of the Muratoglu machine, who are obviously a very good PR machine. They are handling all her PR matters as far as I certainly were last time I spoke to anybody. I think it's a problem tennis has that look, and it's not just tennis; it's all sports. If anyone who's been following the Conor Benn case in boxing, for example, will know that the problem is you've got athletes who are happy to protest their innocence as publicly as they possibly can, while privately paying very expensive lawyers to fight their innocence, which they're allowed to do, and it's important they are. But who pays for the doping companies? I know for a fact, and I know this for a fact, that a very high-profile doping case in the UK was not contested by the UK doping agency because they were worried that they would go bankrupt because they were like, this is too expensive, and it was like we think we might have the person involved, but we can't afford to pursue it, and that's the problem. The ITAA, I almost certainly, I don't know the financials there, but I think I can say with relative confidence they're probably underfunded, but because most anti-doping agencies are, and so I think yes, it's all very well standing up, and as you say, Calvin, it's a bit rich to stand up and say, "Oh, they're my mate, they're definitely innocent," and I make no comment about Simona Halep's innocence or guilt on this case. It's ongoing.
Well, I think he said something like, I don't remember the exact tweet, but he said something like, regardless of what's happened, this treatment is disgraceful or something like that.
Here you go. He says, Simona is in tennis purgatory due to the constant delays in proceedings from the ITAA. Her colleagues should have her back and broadcast it in the public forum, allow her a proper and fair hearing. If you walked in her shoes, you'd at least want that regardless of the findings. I mean, it's all very well saying you want a proper and fair hearing, but like, this is legal process, This is what happens before hearings. Like,
and also that a colleague should stand up. Like, well, what if she's been cheating? She's been cheating her colleagues out of tennis matches.
Yeah,
like you're going to stand up and go. If you think so, if somebody's been found guilty of cheating, you want the players to stand up, but the players who are not her friends, to go like, this is a disgrace. We want Simona's case dealing with straight away, and it's not like you say, James. It's not like the ITA are just sitting on. It's not like it's on a file at the bottom of a backlog. Yeah. They're working on it, and they have to find the best way. And again, one thing that I do know is that in all the sport I've watched, I've seen the years I've watched sport, a lot of people have been found guilty of doping. There aren't many of them that claim, I cheated.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's always but this happened, or I didn't know. And ironically, the only one who actually came out and said he cheated eventually was Lance Armstrong.
And now
after years of claiming he absolutely didn't.
Yeah, and now there's something weird. I mean, quite. And as I say, there's no implication here that Simona Halep is guilty or innocent. The fact is she's been suspended, and the reason that people are suspended provisionally rather than play under protest is because doping is basically strict liability. If something appears in your bloodstream, it's like speeding.
Yeah.
If you are recorded going over the speed limit, there is no excuse. You cannot get away with it. And doping is the same. You can mitigate, and you can say, well, it was contamination, which I'm led to believe. Trying to think. Anyway, you can say it's contaminated or anything. You can mitigate, and that will be accepted, and they call it no fault, and they say fair enough. We're not going to give you a long ban. The suspension of 18 months stands, and people do come back from that. But that is unfortunately that's the stand you have to take in doping because there will always be people with more money than the doping agencies, and I think probably I would always rather be on that side rather than the other one. But
I think it's something as well that and somebody raised this point to me the other day when I was talking about this case, and not specifically with Simona Halep, but a lot of these athletes who are extremely wealthy, in that they go on these sort of they often take chefs with them, and they have these very strict diets, and it's even more strict liability when that's the case because it seems a bit more shady if you know what I mean. Like there are certain players, for example, who you won't see in the restaurant at the US Open eating the same food as 90% of the others. And, so if say one of them gets, you could argue, well, if you'd been eating the same food as the rest of us, you wouldn't have, this might not be a problem. But instead, it's always a steak from a cow that has been found doping or whatever.
Yes, the context for that is in Mexico, they very often use clenbuterol as a fat stripper on cows, and quite regularly athletes do test positive.
The tennis player did, didn't he? The doubles player, the Colombian doubles player.
Yeah.
Rob Farah.
I should check that before we just randomly start naming people who've got a doping charge.
It's him or his partner, I can't remember.
Oh, good, all right. Well, we've got a 50-50 chance of definitely libeling someone. It was Robert Farah who escaped a doping ban after the ITF investigation accepted his claim of contaminated beef, which is a common thing in Central America. I remember a whole under-23 football team testing positive for it, and basically they'd all gone to the same restaurant the night before the game, and so they all did it. It does happen. Right, I tried to talk about tennis, but as always happens, we got distracted. Who else has kind of caught your eye? It's been a funny old tournament. I said this to George just before Elena Rybakina and Iga Swiatek lost. So we haven't really learnt much about the women's draw yet, and then of course we learnt a load about the women's draw. In terms of the men's draw, I wonder who of the quarterfinalists, Calvin, and at the moment we know we have Novak Djokovic, Taylor Fritz, Ben Shelton, Francis Tiafoe, Andre Rublev, and Carlos Alcaraz. Ben Shelton's the only unseeded one in there, and you were kind enough to give me some quotes for a piece that I wrote, an interview I did with Ben Shelton, and he's hit 249 mile-an-hour serves that have caught the eye. Is this the coming of age for Ben Shelton that we've all been expecting?
Yeah, before this tournament, he hadn't won back-to-back matches since the Australian Open.
Yeah,
and now he's in the quarterfinals, and he's had decent wins as well.
Yeah.
He's looked pretty good, but he's had good profile of opponents for him as well.
Right,
I think he's had guys who not going to hit big back and take him. You make him do a lot of defending. He's had guys who he can, pretty much do all the attacking against.
So presumably, on the basis of that, he's playing Francis Tiafoe in the quarterfinals. Is that someone you would look at and go, that's a real challenge for him because there is going to be power coming back?
Yeah, although Francis's results are so up and down.
Yeah.
You just never know. It'd be an interesting one, that entertaining match, I think.
Yeah.
The thing that cracked me up about Ben Shelton, I saw someone the other day, like showed a still of his serve, and they were breaking down why it was a terrible service action. And I was like, have you seen it? Seen his serve. We're going to come out and start messing around with that, are we? Like, come out and start going to maybe get you do like, is this ball toss in optimum position? It's like, I don't even know whether they were saying it was or it wasn't, or somebody else had said it wasn't or what. But the guy who I know said it is a good coach. I know him, but like, come on. Like, it's like, do we have to change everything about technique? We're talking about Ben Shelton changing his serve. Got an absolute scud missile.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, that does happen, right? Like, you wouldn't teach anyone Andy Roddick's serving technique, would you?
No. Yeah, it's and it's actually similar action, to be fair. Ben Shelton's and Andy Roddick's. Is
that right?
Yeah, it's big knee bend, kind of like straight up.
Yeah.
Motion, but yeah, and absolute rockets, both of them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've enjoyed it just because I published an interview with him, and usually that means they lose first round. So it's rare that I don't curse someone with the interview. Although I did.
How was he in the interview? He's a nice kid. I think.
Lovely. I did it earlier in the summer actually, and it was I didn't put this in the interview. You'll understand why, but someone I'd done quite a lot of research for it for once. And just a couple of minutes before, someone said, he's dating an athlete. I was like, oh, is he? Oh, okay. What's she do? Heptathlete. Oh, okay, yeah. Looked her up. Anna Hall, yeah, really good. Like, one of the best in the world. And like third or fourth question, I was like, oh, so you're obviously on tour in Europe for the first time. But, you must have, it's nice to have your missus. She's obviously going around Europe on tour as well because she just turned pro or just went onto the pro circuit. And he like looked over at the press guy he was with and smiled. He's like, actually, we broke up like a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. But they credit to him. He was like, yeah, but she is an athlete and she's a really good one. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, you've not shut me down here. And yeah, he was just like a pretty affable guy. And he's 21 now. Like, he kind of was a sort of classic kid who just like, hasn't seen much of the world and he's 20, I beg your pardon, and just hasn't got huge amounts of life experience. But he was quite open, actually. That's what really surprised me. Often with the young guys, like, they're very reserved and they don't want to say anything wrong. They don't realise that anecdotes are funny, and he kind of does. Like, he's got quite good emotional intelligence, I think. And he was talking about how the first time he got to Europe, they went and played Estoril. And the night before he was playing Dominic Thiem, they went out for like a seafood dinner, and they got like a massive seafood platter. And obviously seafood in Portugal is spectacular. And he basically had a bit of everything and then spent the next 16 hours like vomiting his brains out. And he's like, I really don't know what it was, so I don't know if I'm allergic to something or it was bad or whatever. And I said, did you? Because I couldn't remember. I said, did you still play? And he's like, oh, yeah. I got chopped big time. I thought that was quite funny because then he played Dominic Thiem in the second round in the US Open, and Dominic Thiem had the bug that's been going around and pulled out after 2 sets. Have you been aware of this bug that's flying around, Calvin?
I've not, but I know, and the lads, to be fair, have been eating quite a bit of it. But there's a sushi bar in there that I wouldn't be eating sushi in the heat that it is out here. I know that much. But the lads actually have been getting. Well, Jules actually not Henry, but Jules. I think on the first day, or he got like first training day, he got like a poke bowl with sushi at the top of it and some eel sauce. Wow. And he ate it at about 10:30 in the morning, which was to me was just like mind blowing. But then he felt pretty good after it, so he got one before every match. So he's been having one before he goes on every match, but he was fine. But
so it's not the poke bowls, we know that.
No, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's something to do with the sushi, to be honest, because it's like I say, it's pretty warm and it's not. I mean, it's air conditioned in there, but
Yeah. Ben Shelton plays Francis Tiafoe and an absolutely stacked schedule on Arthur Ashe tomorrow because you've got Coco Gauff in there as well. Novak Djokovic up against Taylor Fritz, which, I mean, do you give Fritz any chance there, Calvin? I mean,
I think you've got to do just because he's absolutely steamrolled everybody.
Yeah.
But I don't think he'll beat him. I think Djokovic will end up beating him pretty comfortably. But you've got to say, it's it wouldn't be surprised if he gives him a bit of a run there.
Yeah. I do think, and maybe it's just, availability heuristic, but I do think that That Indian Wells thing of beating Rafa in the final there, and like everything that he went through to play that final, it did give me an idea of his mindset. And actually, funnily enough, just after I interviewed Ben Shelton, I interviewed Taylor Fritz, and I asked him about Shelton because he also came on tour young. And the thing he said was, you got to learn to lose a lot. Like when you first go on tour, you got to learn to lose a lot. And
Yeah.
it made me remember that Taylor Fritz has been on tour for like 7 or 8 years. Like, you know, he's quite baby faced, and he's, you know, he's only 25, but
Apparently
he's been on tour a long
dating
time.
Some tennis Instagram influencer
Yes,
or something.
this is
Who
true.
was on the front of the New York Times this week. Somebody told me.
Yeah, she's a big deal. Morgan Riddle is her name. She's the sort of the key. You see a lot of her in the Netflix doc. Put it that way.
Right.
Because she's it's a key influencer. Let's just move on to the women's draw briefly. I mean, there's really only one result I really, really want to talk about, which is Iga Swiatek losing to Jelena Ostapenko. I was kind of fascinated to read her quotes afterwards. She was talking about how usually she starts matches badly and then works her way out of it, and against Ostapenko, it's a total difference. Calvin, this is turning into a bit of a problem player for Iga Swiatek. She's 0-4 against Jelena Ostapenko, which I find weird because it's not like Ostapenko is, you know, a bigger hitter of the ball than, say, Aryna Sabalenka or, you know, Elena Rybakina necessarily. But is it just that she can get so hot that she takes the racket out of Swiatek's hand and she hasn't got a solution to that yet?
Yeah, and I also think maybe a little bit in her head. You know, once you're 0-4, you're going to start thinking, like, what do I have to do here?
Yeah.
You know, and the thing with Ostapenko as well is that she absolutely believes that she's the best tennis player in the world.
Yeah.
So, she, you know, whereas I think a lot of the girls with Swiatek, that she's kind of in their heads now just because she's been so dominant.
Yeah.
And also, consciously or unconsciously, Swiatek does a little bit of shithousing, like, you know, manipulates the rules sometimes, and there's nobody who does more than Ostapenko. So it's like that kind of stuff doesn't work with her.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think all of those things tied in
Yeah.
are, you know, are the reason why that she has more chance of beating her than anyone else.
Is she one of those, what is it Jurgen Klopp called them, mentality monsters? Jelena Ostapenko.
Well, she's kind of not really, is she? Because sometimes she just sacks it off.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not like you can say that every time she comes out, she's just a raw competitor. Like, sometimes she just fancies it.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, I find, again, I've met her a couple of times and she really makes me laugh. Like, she's a really funny person. She just says what she wants. And, you know, and you get it on court. And I think that's really attractive just to the fan that, like, you know, yes, she's a shit house because she really wants to win. But like you said, like, she's very rarely just like sort of hiding her feelings. Like, she's all out there. And I think that Coco Gauff match would be really fascinating because, like, Coco Gauff's a little, not an extrovert. She kind of lets her tennis do the talking to an extent, but, you know, she likes getting the crowd up. The New York crowd will go absolutely mental for her. But I wonder if that pantomime villain role, I think Ostapenko might really love it. I think that might be a problem.
I'm sure, yeah.
Which way would you see that one going, Calvin? Top of the draw, Ostapenko, Gauff?
I mean, Gauff's playing well again, isn't she? And I'm now not accepting any of this nonsense from people saying I was wrong, because the guy who I said was coach is clearly not. Brad Gilbert's her coach. Like, that's clear to everybody now. She's even sort of acknowledging that. So we can forget that idea. You think that guy's just basically a hitter. It's fun. I mean, her press conferences are just brilliant. Coco Gauff's, like, she's just dynamite, isn't she? Like, like, just an absolute star.
She's just such a. Again, I think it's a little bit of Taylor Fritz syndrome as well. Like, she's been on tour for so long that we kind of forget that. Even though I know people always talk about teenage sensation, blah blah blah, but you really get it when you see her talk, because she's so composed and she kind of has everything on her. That she never really gets caught out by a question. Like, I can't ever remember her going, and then just like pulling what most players do. For people who don't watch every press conference ever, most players, when they get caught out by a question, will just like push out the stock answer. Like, they have a little cog whirring moment, and then they just like training kicks in, and they kind of have their response. Whereas Gauff always has a little cog-wearing moment and then has a really thoughtful and interesting answer. I don't know how much has changed about Coco Gauff's tennis. I mean, I suppose in the end she's only in the quarterfinals, and she has dropped sets along the way against Ziegman and against Mertens and against Wozniacki. I saw Brad Gilbert saying he's not changed the way she hits her forehand at all, which I thought was interesting, because I guess he only came in a couple of weeks ago, and probably if you want to make really big technical changes, a couple of weeks before the US Open, your home slam isn't the answer, but maybe just a bit more belief, Calvin.
I think it could only be that, confidence, belief. I think that's where she's really changed, which happens when you start winning matches.
Yeah,
the forehand's just the same. She just probably is not so stressing about it so much. And
also, I spoke to Martina Navratilova about it. That Fanta Ice Lemon's going down well then, Calvin.
Yeah, sorry about that. Fanta Pineapple, actually.
Oh, Oh, God, they don't sell it over here. That is good, that.
No, they do in a lot of shops now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like the corner shops and stuff around London.
Yeah.
You can pick it up
Dodgy
there.
corner shops.
But yeah.
Okay, good to know. I was talking to Martina Navratilova about the Coco Gauff thing, and I sort of said, how's Brad Gilbert done this? And she said the same thing. She was like, she's not hitting it any different, but Brad Gilbert wasn't that good a tennis player, and he did really well. He knows how to hide a weakness. And I thought that was I don't know whether that you buy that at all, Calvin, but I thought it was a really interesting way into it.
I mean, it's one of those, people used to say that about Brad Gilbert, and it's kind of true, but he also, he was a good tennis player. He just wasn't one of the top 5 tennis players in the world, probably, but, he's a very good tennis player. And it's all right saying knows how to hide a weakness, but I don't think she's hiding a weakness, really. And 2, you can't hide a forehand. You can probably, you can hide if you drive backhands dodgy, you can do some slicing in that. You can't hide a drive forehand. You're going to hit them more than any other shot.
I mean, tell that to Benoit Paire.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't hide it. That's the problem, isn't it?
Oh, Calvin, incidentally, that's reminded me that I was quite ill a few weeks ago, and I had a very weird fever dream that Benoit Paire had taken you on as a coach.
Wow.
And
wow.
Just looking back on it, thinking about it, I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, great. There'd be so much great content out of this. And then looking back, I'm like, it would have been fucking horrendous. You would have hated every minute of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
that's
Jesus.
more of a nightmare that than a dream, I'd suggest.
Yeah, quite.
Is he still playing? What's he doing?
It's actually a great question. In my dream, he was clearly. He's playing some challenges in Italy. He played US Open qualies, and he made the semis of Challenger in Como. And tomorrow, he is playing Marco Trungelliti in a Challenger in Genoa.
Okay.
I don't really know why, if I'm honest.
I mean, it must be strange for players like that, though, because he's not that old. What is he, about 30, 31?
34. He's 34.
Oh, he's 34, right, okay, yeah. It must be strange for them. Yeah, it's particularly strange for him, because you get why there are certain people who they just love tennis, love competing, and they'll just, like Tommy Robredo did, they'll just keep on dropping down. All they really care about is playing tennis matches. They love playing tennis matches. Whereas Benoit Paire doesn't like tennis or competing.
No, he hates it.
Hates both of them. And there isn't much money in challenges, so it can't be for that reason. So it makes you really do wonder what is he doing.
Yeah, I don't really know. I can't get my head around it. I mean, I suppose it should be noted that Benoit Paire is an extremely complicated bloke, and is he's got documented mental health issues, and you can also see it on the court. It's not easy, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Just one last question for you, Calvin, or kind of topic maybe. I just want to talk about the Brits very briefly, because we talked about Jack Draper, but we didn't talk about Dan Evans and Cam Norrie. I mean, Cam Norrie maybe the word. I mean, this is no disrespect to Matteo Arnaldi, but I'm pretty sure George said on our podcast before that match, there's no way Cam Norrie loses to Matteo Arnaldi. I mean,
that's a bold statement from George. I'd say that if I was on that one, I'd have called him out on that nonsense. Because in Norrie's form at the minute, he can lose to anybody.
Yeah.
And Arnaldi's a decent player. He's not a world beater by any stretch, but he's a decent player. So I thought that all of Cam's matches this week, although he's won a couple pretty easy, like I thought, he's in that kind of form where you think could easily lose that.
Yeah.
And I thought the first round when he played Shevchenko, I thought could easily lose that.
Yeah. And then equally, I mean, or not equally, but quite opposite, Evo up against Carlos Alcaraz. He got a set off him. I mean, at this stage of his career, and it's probably the most he could really expect, isn't it?
I mean, it's funny because I said on the way in, like I was talking with Henry on the way into the match, and I said, it's interesting. I'd be interested to know how people think in that way, because in tennis, you've got to be, in particularly in like Evo's tennis, and I didn't speak to him before the match, spoke to him a bit after. But in any of these players, you've got to be you've got to know enough about the game to know, levels and standards and that kind of thing, which on that level you'd be looking at thinking, I'm in for a tough afternoon here. But also to be that good as Evo is, you'd also have to be a little bit deluded to think that you can beat everybody. Yeah. So it's an interesting sort of paradox that I think into how that works. But he said I watched a bit of it. We were practicing at the start of it, but then I went to watch a bit, and it was. I'm trying to think of the way that there was a period at the end of the third, start of the fourth, where if he'd have got a little bit more, it could have got interesting. And he said to me, Evo said to me, I just needed something and I didn't get it.
Just like a little, dead net cord here or there, or just something.
Yeah, or just like an error. He hits an error, or like Alcaraz hits an error, or Evo, a couple of big aces when he needed them or something, and but Alcaraz is, he's just a phenomenal player. He's just some player, isn't he?
I'm trying to remember your pre-tournament prediction, Alcaraz or Djokovic, Calvin, but you can have a redo now. Alcaraz or Djokovic now. Djokovic
I thought Alcaraz before. I think Alcaraz will still beat him.
I didn't see much of that 5-setter against Laszlo Djere where Djokovic came from 2 sets down and dead and buried. I mean, do we just not trust Djokovic 2 sets down in Grand Slams now?
No, I sent into the group, and I fell asleep when it was 6-4, 6-4, but I sent you and George. When it was 4-6, 4-6, I sent a message going 4-6, 4-6. I think I said 6-3, 6-1, 6-1, and it was just the other way around. Like, it was the most predictable comeback. I reckon he was still odds on when he was 2 sets to love down there.
Yeah.
I'd have had him odds on when he was 2 sets to love down.
Crikey. What a time to be alive. Well, Calvin, what's your plan? Have you got a little tour around the US plan now, or what?
No, I'm coming home. I was semi-thinking about taking a little tour, but it's kind of taken it out of me this week. So I'm coming home tomorrow. I've taken a day today to do a bit of sightseeing. Went down to Greenwich Village, did a little Bob Dylan walking tour.
Nice.
So a lot of the places where Bob Dylan sort of lived and performed when he first moved to New York. And then...
my controversial Bob Dylan opinion is I think he's one of the worst singers ever to have had a number one.
Well, I mean, strong disagree. He's not a great technical singer, but he sings Bob Dylan songs better than anyone else. And he's a genius songwriter. So
I give him that. So you like, I'll give him that. Got to give him it.
Yeah. I was gonna. I don't fly while late tomorrow night, so tomorrow I'm going to try and go up to Harlem and have a little look around there.
Lovely.
Yeah, so that's...
Keep your wits about you.
Yeah, apparently it's all right now, though.
Yeah, I think it's not as bad as it used to be. I think you have to give it...
I was going to go the other day because I thought it's basically, for anyone who doesn't know the geography of New York, it's Central Park and then it's Harlem.
Yeah.
So it's at the other side of Central Park from where we are. And I started walking up Central Park. I must have been walking 20 minutes. I looked in my... I put my map on to see where I was, and I reckon I was less than a quarter up the way up Central Park at that stage. So I thought, no, I'm turning around. I'm not going yet.
Yeah, it turns out Central Park, quite big. I've made that mistake myself.
And not strictly a park, is it? There's roads through it and everything.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realise there was a technical definition, but...
Yeah, it's not just a big, not just a massive field with trees in it. Although it is a field with trees in it, but there's roads run through it and things.
Okay. as far as as far as I can tell, it's just lots of people smoking weed most of the time. But
well, this is one thing I have noticed about New York this time. They've legalized weed, and the place absolutely reeks of it.
Yeah, everywhere.
Everywhere,
to be honest, you're obviously staying up by Grand Central. I was staying in Midtown, where the smell of weed was like a kind of sweet release from all the other smells that Midtown has, which is like trash, human feces. Whatever the smell of the risers is, like that smell that comes out of the ground is just horrific. So I was quite grateful for marijuana. But when you hear players complaining at Flushing Meadows about the smell of weed on some courts, it's totally legitimate. The whole of Queens smells like that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I think the whole of New York, like I say, I don't know. It was in the last year that they've legalized it, or was it?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about where New York fell, but it might have been a bit sooner than that. But it is rife, and we don't have an opinion on that. I reckon we will hold our opinions on the legalizations of drugs because there's only so much trouble we can get into in 1 week. We've talked about drugs, but not those ones. That's all we've got time for this week. Great to have you back, Calvin. Very safe journey home. Look forward to going through the knockout stages I say the knockout stages. It's all knockout. The latter stages. It's because I'm going to the Rugby World Cup on Wednesday, so I've got two heads on at the moment. But safe journey home, and great to have you back.